Oh, hello, and welcome to Dente Rigamortis. I'm Review Cultist.
And I'm Dr. Leviathan.
And tonight we have a very special guest.
Hey, I'm Matt from The Drunk and the Ugly. I've been here before.
Yes. We brought Matt on because we had some talking, and we are going to do Godzilla NES. The whole thing.
All of it.
Verbatim. So, for those of you just tuning in, creepypastas, just go Google it. And while you're at it, also Google NES Godzilla, because you'll probably find this as the top search.
You'll find this, and then you'll find the blog that it's written on, and then you'll find the old blog that it's written on, and then a couple entries down, you'll find an interview with the guy who wrote it.
Yeah, and I mean, if you don't want to go to their blog, you can also check it out at creepypasta.wiki.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to listen to this rather than read it, on YouTube, there is Mr.CreepyPasta and Goji73. That's Goji 73. Both of them have a pretty decent reading of it. That's cut up into sections.
Yeah, I listened to Mr. CreepyPasta's. I think View Cultists listened to Goji 73's. They both have playlists. At least Mr. CreepyPasta adds in sound effects and royalty-free music.
Yeah, Goji
royalty-free music for days.
Yeah. It's not like we do that ever. But yeah, Goji does the same thing. Like has creepy ambient music and even has like a distorted creepy voice whenever the main antagonist of the story pops in.
Face?
No, Red.
Yes, Face.
No, Face. I want it to be Face.
All right, fine. Face. The secret boss of Godzilla NES. So, all right, let's just dive right into this insanity.
So do we want to give background? I guess we should give some background on what this is based on.
Yeah, sure.
So there's a Toho produced a Godzilla game for the Nintendo Entertainment System back in 1988. I believe it's called Godzilla King of Monsters, and it's a standard action game kind of. It starts with like a huge overworld map where which some people have described as Godzilla chess, because you have Godzilla and Mothra on one side of the board, and then there's three monsters that you have to fight on the other side of the board, and there's a bunch of levels in between that, and you can move your piece, and you fight other pieces, and the actual action is kind of shitty. You just go from left to right across a screen. There's a lot of slowdown. You have to punch down obstacles as Godzilla or fly over them as Mothra, and then when you fight a monster, you go to a totally environmentless world that is a single screen wide, just black in the background. Godzilla or Mothra is on the left and the other boss is on the right, and you mash up against each other, and one of you eventually kills each other unless, I think there's like a 40-second timer, and if you lose that, you get sent back to the overworld screen. You have to fight them again on another turn.
Yeah.
And it does that for like 8 levels.
Yeah. 8 agonizing levels.
So, yeah, so it's a very it's not a good game. It's honestly probably not the worst game on the Nintendo, but it's
an NES game.
It's glitchy and it's subpar even for a licensed game.
Ouch. So yeah, and I guess with anything else we want to do before we go into the chapters.
I mean, we could probably give a basic rundown of the entire plot, I'm going to say basic rundown, like, I mean, just hit the barest story beats, like, this is a lost episode pasta, so you guys have covered a bunch of those, so I'm guessing your listenership is starting to notice a pattern in these.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, well, the whole thing starts off with, this guy, when he was a kid, he loved Godzilla, the NES game, and as he got older, he wanted to you got to track down an NES and then track down a copy of Godzilla that his friend gave him along with a bunch of other games.
But, shock and twist, there's something wrong with this copy.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Oh no.
You're blowing my mind, Leviathan.
I mean, spoiler alert.
Yes. Spoilers. Go and read this entire story. Or don't. I don't care.
Yeah, or go listen to it.
Actually, don't. You'll thank me later.
Read the first 5 chapters of it and then stop.
Nice.
5 chapters, that's a little mean.
Okay.
Yes, it turns out that the game is haunted by a demon, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, like, he goes playing through it, all the while taking screenshots, screen caps of of certain parts of the game. And the game just kind of goes from being the Godzilla game to being a glitchy version of the Godzilla game to being what at first seems a hacked version of the game because there's a bunch of new characters in it. And then just spirals down into
Madness.
Yeah, madness, insanity, and why the hell are these graphics in a NES game? How is the NES supporting these insane supernatural graphics?
A thing which the author will remind us again and again and again.
But not before he reminds us about all of the ways the music is music.
Yes, so I guess the first thing that I'll say before we get into this, if you want to play along at home and you don't have to drive anywhere, through the 2 or 3 times I reread this, for this show, I discovered a pattern, and from that I made a drinking game. And I'm not good at devising rules for drinking games, so all of these are take a shot when. Take a shot when any of the following happens. The author mentions taking a screen cap. The author says, "Whoa, that's a weird glitch. How did this happen in this game?" When a new monster shows up that is from a Godzilla movie and has incredibly detailed mechanics and all the things it does are super faithful to the Godzilla franchise. Take a shot when there's a description of music from either the overworld or a level that is incredibly well described with instruments and sometimes choirs that are not possible on the NES. Take a shot when the author spends a long time talking about how this level is fucking impossible and yet he somehow managed to win on his first try. Take a shot when a level has an overly symbolic theme that is beaten over your head. Take a shot whenever the author mentions something making a furious roar. Take a shot whenever the graphics are too advanced for the NES, but not so advanced that they actually look good. And take a shot when some enemy has some other animal's skull for a head.
Oh, right, yeah.
I guarantee by the end of this you will have taken 90 shots.
And may need to go to the hospital for alcohol
Do
poisoning.
it with shots of beer. Do it with shots of beer, or I don't know. Alternate shots of hard liquor and water.
Yes.
And I guess the other thing that makes this interesting in comparison to other lost episode things is that it's actually played kind of straight to the style of a screenshot LP.
Yeah.
There are some deficiencies, and it does get overly wordy for an LP. But then again, I think a lot of video games don't actually cause you physical pain when you play them. So
you may want to, yeah.
6 of one, half a dozen of the other. And also, I guess the other thing to say is that according to the author, before he actually made this story, he planned to make a Godzilla fighting game, which was going to use all these sprites.
So he just recycled his previous project.
Well, I guess not all of the sprites, because there's stuff in here that obviously wouldn't fit into a Godzilla fan game.
Yeah, like the deer or the alien deer and
like all the things that have nothing to do with Godzilla.
Yeah, like him exploring apparently like being enthralled and immersed in this. Oh my god, it's like looking into a dimension of like a whole new world through 8-bit power.
Isn't that
a brand new place I never
NES
knew?
games are about? Isn't that why
when
we
I'm-
play
when I-
them?
When I'm way up here, it's crystal clear. I want to view this whole new world with you.
God damn it. We are not doing a horror Aladdin game.
Not yet.
Go.
God,
Let it go.
I will make you read some of the frozen creepypastas.
Feel free to send any Aladdin-themed creepypastas to aldenterigamortis@gmail.com.
Do it.
Yeah, actually,
Do it.
yeah.
It's time for the cultist to suffer along with me.
All right, so I guess we've bullshitted around enough. We should probably actually do this.
Yeah. Okay.
So, chapters 0 and 1. The Prelude / Earth / Mars. Who wants to... Do we just want to go through the beats and somebody can interrupt when they want to talk about a thing?
Let's go with that. It's probably the best
All right, so it's the author starts saying, "Oh, my friend Billy he got a game from a mysterious source." And he talks a little bit about how the NES Godzilla game works, not as detailed as we did at the top of this, and I didn't even mention that much of it. He also does take the point of mentioning that this game actually sucks a lot, even if you do like Godzilla, which is a thing that many people have said about it.
Yeah.
And then he's playing it, and he's fighting Gazora, and oh my god, there's a weird glitch that red blocks show up everywhere, and then Gazora's eye shows up everywhere, and like I said before, the game actually was really glitchy, but it had your standard Nintendo like frame flickering things whenever like more than 2 things were on the screen at a time. And so then he's like, "Oh, I had to restart it, and I took out the cartridge and blew on it, and then the bosses like glitched out again, but kind of differently." But then he ends up getting to the next board, which is Mars, and like, "Oh, hey, there's a new monster here that shouldn't be in the game. Oh, this monster was from a movie that was released just before the game, so maybe I got a rare copy of it." And then he's fighting Gazora because in the game you fight all of the monsters multiple times because it's an NES game and it doesn't have a lot of assets.
Yeah.
It's like, it seemed like Gazora was almost being consumed by the glitch. And I forgot to mention that one of these glitches, like the scoreboard glitches out, and he mentions that it looks like there was a bird in the cage on the top right.
And we will never hear from this again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like
it'll never be referenced ever. It has no significance. How could it have significance? It's an NES game. And then, so let's see. So yeah, oh man, I should have. And then I should have known something was very wrong with this game when I noticed this happening. And then he fights Magura, who is shitty and also is enormous.
Yeah, way too big.
I was lucky to get a screenshot of this glitch as I defeated Magura, who was easy because he's shit. And yeah, there we go. You notice the garble includes the bird in a cage, and then I had to fight Titanosaurus, and it was weird because he was taller than Godzilla, but all the monsters are the same. But it's cool because Titanosaurus was actually taller than Godzilla in the movies, so this was kind of a nice touch, honestly.
I feel like.
And then he defeats Titanosaurus, but instead of going to I think Saturn from Mars, he ends up going.
No, it's Jupiter, I think.
Oh yeah, to Jupiter. He ends up going to Pathos.
Yeah, I feel like Wreck-It Ralph pulled any game like story plot line like about a glitch is taken from this, or it's just a common trope.
Yeah, the glitches are far. Well, I mean, it's not to say that games don't have. It's not to say that games don't have really, really interesting glitches, but they're in short supply. It's kind of like Pawn Stars, how that whole show's like just made up
and just exploded in terms of like all the different versions of it now.
Yeah, well, and the thing is that Pawn Stars, like, even when it started, Pawn Stars was fake because not that many people bring interesting things into pawn shops, and most people aren't going to sell their $500,000 Gatling gun to a pawnbroker,
or their letter from the Confederacy that their family members had that may have had a signed signature from the president of the time, or
an actual holy relic containing part of a saint.
God, really? That was
Well, ultimately, they had a nun come in to talk about that one, and they said, well, it actually says on this that you shouldn't sell this because it'll cause bad things. And so he handed it back and said, "This is a priceless artifact, which means it's worthless to me." But anyway, we're like one chapter into this.
I've been looking to get rid of my Ark of the Covenant, so...
Top men are watching it. Top men.
Yes. And then with that segue... What segue? What? We move on to Pathos.
Half this episode's getting cut.
What are you talking about?
Go!
Yeah, so, Pathos, it's like Jupiter, except everything's blue, and oh my gosh, there's new levels now, and Biolante's here, but Biolante didn't show up until after the game was released.
Yeah, so it's nothing
which
like
is weird.
It's like Jupiter, but everything's been changed. Oh, wow.
I guess when he says that, maybe the layout's the same. I'm not that familiar with the game, so I don't know what the boards, because all the boards are different shapes in the game.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what he meant. I have no idea. But yeah, Biolante's here, but that's weird because Biolante didn't come out until a film in 1989, which is a year after this game was released. Maybe it's a really, really rare copy, and they did this to promote the game, but to promote the movie, but they didn't put it out. And then the song is, let's see.
I'll
and then,
take my drink now. Song is being described.
Oh yeah. This map has a, let's see. It's had a really elaborate setup and sound like a weird crash every 12 seconds and then silence. For anybody actually who's interested, somebody, a really committed fan of this actually went through and made a 34-song soundtrack that is every song described by the author of this.
And I just gotta say, any fan of this should be committed.
Yeah, no,
Horrible pun, but I had to.
You told me about that earlier, and I actually listened to a couple of them, like, while I was going through my third or fourth read of this.
They're actually really well done.
Yeah, and it's surprising, like, how, especially that, like, the password one. But, it's pretty decent, and amazing how somebody could spend that much time on this.
I'm guessing like making music is just a thing they were interested in. It's like, oh, this guy put up a bunch of song prompts, let me just make this.
Yeah, it's kind of like what people, like how this guy like knew how to do a bunch of like pixel assets and stuff.
Yeah, the author of this, Cosbydaf, has actually made a bunch of different pastas and also has a DeviantArt, which is just Cosbydaf.deviantart, where they have a bunch of sprite art that they do, and so it makes sense that they'd go and do this kind of thing. Also this sticks to a weird thing where when a new monster is introduced, they generally somehow stick to the Godzilla movie chronology. With few exceptions, like the monsters are introduced in order and in the significance that they have to the films.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is also this is the first musical score that's like way too complicated to be described on an NES, and also the soundtrack. It'll be linked somewhere.
I will post
maybe
a link on the description below.
Yeah, there's a whole playlist. The soundtrack isn't an 8-bit because the sounds are just too complicated. Like we're describing choirs and we're trying to do this in 8-bit.
Yeah, the system just can't handle it.
But yeah, so there's new levels in the game, and they start introducing new mechanics, kind of. Let's see, because there's the blue levels in Pathos, which have no enemies, no obstacles. The music, the point meter glitched out, and it's basically, it's very clearly like the Moon World from the Earth stages, except with the palette swap. And also the music was very sorrowful, and I felt like it felt like it could have been very interesting in a normal game. And then the orange levels are already seemingly beyond the capacity of the NES graphics, although the author doesn't mention that.
Yeah.
And the only enemies in it are Matango Spawn, which is I looked it up, and Matango was a fungus monster from one Godzilla movie I can't remember that shot a bunch of spores. I guess that was its signature thing.
Yeah, I guess that explains why the screen caps look like Shoggoths everywhere.
Because it's just. Yeah, it's just eyes, and then there's like weird floating fungus jellyfish things.
Yeah.
And the music, it was nothing but screeches and loud drum beats, and these levels kind of freaked me out, so I just didn't play them. And also they were really hard because there was shit everywhere.
But he got through it first try.
Got through it first try. And then, let's see, and then Mogra was different, and he instead of being huge, he was tiny and fast, and he had like a weird drill on his face, and he was actually kind of hard to fight, and Gazora turned from a squid into this weird, like, long-legged eyeball thing, and it was really fast, and it had a lot of range, because it had these big arms that could swipe at you, and then he tried to fight Titanosaurus, and then the fight happens, but just stops, and then he goes back, and then Biollante was still strangely where it should be, and Biollante has multiple forms that he goes into great detail to describe. It starts out as its rose form, and then it blooms, and it gets all these new attacks, and it can move around, but moves very slowly, just like Biollante in the films.
Okay, question.
What?
Does the NES have the ability? Like, I know, like, we've already tossed out the window that this is kind of impossible for the NES. But did the NE game ever have like a boss that changed multiple forms over the course of a stage?
Oh yeah, no.
Okay, so that is a thing?
Like that's a pretty common trope. Even in this game, actually, even in the actual real game, there were some bosses that when they lost about half their health, they'd change. But yeah, no, like bosses that change multiple times. That's not outside the purview for the. It's usually a thing reserved for final bosses, because if you did it a bunch, or in a lot of games, the way that a boss would get stronger is that they just, like, change to a different palette. Like, if they were blue, suddenly they turn red and they'd move really fast.
Yeah. That's kind of what Zelda tends to do a lot. Just flashing red.
Yeah. And then we get to the part where everything kind of changes. That instead of the base, there's a new piece that looked like a red tribal mask. It filled me with fear, and this seems really so. And then there's a level that is a world bathed in flames, and this is the first time the author acknowledges that this is way too complicated for the NES to handle, because it has like
circles,
like
for one, like
it has circles, and it has more than 16 colors on the screen.
Yeah, like you're looking at it, like I'm looking at it, like the fire's not too badly designed, but like he's doing it through like using like circle dots, like as pointillism almost, and that like the system couldn't support that.
If any of you are unfamiliar, Review Cultist knows things about drawing and art and color.
If you guys have, if somebody's listening to this and hasn't checked out the Tumblr that has all the title cards for every episode, I did all those. And go check them out. I'll put them in the description below.
Go give him love and praise and applesauce.
Please.
He needs his ascorbic acid. So anyway, the world's bathed in flames, and instead of the life bar and the points and the levels, it just says run. And so the author starts going through the level, and he looked away to grab water or something, and he noticed something was killing Godzilla, and he didn't want to play without him, so he had to restart and put in the password. And that's where he takes a paragraph to talk about the password screen and how the music's actually kind of off-putting. And I guess I'll agree with him, because when he described it, I decided to look up the password music, and it is
unnerving.
It's not creepy or scary, but it's definitely like it doesn't make it. It's definitely like a very different tone than the rest of the game.
It like when I heard it, it felt it resembled more. It didn't actually resemble like a Godzilla theme. It resembled like a Universal Monsters theme. Like that kind of like orchestral, like dark tone, maybe.
Yeah, with the weird like arpeggioing in the background,
like,
and then
like kind of thing like that. I don't know.
I gotta say that for as shitty as the Godzilla game is, the soundtrack actually was pretty alright, especially considering like what kind of things licensed games could shit out on the NES.
Yeah.
But anyway, he enters the password and discovers that instead of going back to the beginning of the Pathos board for the sake of dramatic pacing, he starts exactly where he left off, right in front of the mask. And so he goes back in as Godzilla again, and as he passes through, he hears a low bellowing roar and began to freak out. And then he was terrified and took this screen cap.
That's the one
because I'm terrified. Screen cap.
Yeah, screen cap. That's the one with where we see red for the first time, right?
Yes, the weird hell beast construct.
No, as red.
which looks like which apparently was inspired from a fake movie that people talked about, which is called Godzilla vs. the Devil. Where Godzilla fights 5 different monsters, which are like a scorpion, a spider, and like three other kind of spooky things that fuse together to form some weird chimerical devil creature. And that's basically what inspired the Hellbeast, or Red, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Spoiler: its name is Red.
We'll get into the terror that is face later.
This really unnerving creature that is referred to as the Hellbeast eventually has the canonical name of Red.
Yes.
I'll just spoil that.
Yeah.
Like, the same name as a chewing gum.
Oh God.
But yes, so yeah, I felt terrified, and I took this screen cap because that's the mammalian response to shock.
Yeah. Well, now, in today's day and age, that probably is accurate. Like, taking a camera, it's like, oh man, take a photo. Snapshot on my camera.
Oh man, Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers are after me. Selfie!
Actually, I gotta say, I've actually kind of done that once.
See? So it's true.
So it is a thing. Like, I got freaked out.
All right. I'll give it to you. I'll give it to that. But yeah.
But yeah, no.
One of many times in this game where the author describes something terrifying, describes how he's terrified, and then says, "I took a screen cap."
Is that in the?
Shit my pants, terrified. Screen cap.
Yeah, is that?
Was what in what?
Is that in our drinking game or?
Taking a screen cap, yeah.
Okay, good.
I took a screen cap is yeah, no, that's part of the quintessence of this of this I almost called it an LP of this story.
Yes.
But yes, and then he says, "Red, the Hellbeast, it moves incredibly fast, and if it didn't have the lead on it, it would have been outright impossible to get away. And suddenly there's obstacles. You have to jump over some, and you have to smash some, and you have to crawl under them. But the monster, it moves super fast, and it can eat them. It can eat them without stopping. But I got away without any trouble, which is good because, as I demonstrated before I put in the password, this kills my monsters in one hit." And that thing freaked me out, and this game there's something clearly wrong with this game, but I was curious. I had to push on into trance.
Oh man. Jack Thompson was right. Video games with the devil.
Clearly. This one at least contains one. Trance. So, we go to the board, which was originally supposed to be the Saturn board, but everything's totally different now. And it sounds kind of like the Saturn theme, but it's a lot lower and slower and more ambient. A lot more droning.
There's more tension in it.
And then, and then he notices on the other side of the board, Orga shows up, but that's impossible because Orga didn't show up until Godzilla 2000. And if the people that let's see, the Toho couldn't see that far in the future, they wouldn't have given Roland Emmerich the rights to make Godzilla if that was the case.
Zing! I actually got a chuckle out of that one reading that.
Yeah.
Pretty good. That was actually a pretty good little quip.
Yeah, that's just... and I guess that's the thing that because this is all supposed to be written ex post facto, so they can take time to write little blurbs about that if we want to stick to the canon of how the story worked. And it's so this is ignoring the part where he encountered the Hellbeast that made a terrifying roar even on NES. It's like my friend Billy. It's like he could have maybe made this, except it's way too complicated, and he doesn't know the first thing about ROM hacking, and like if he doesn't know anything about programming or ROM hacking, and I mean honestly, like if he did, I haven't seen any monsters that look like penises, so that can't be it. And even then, even if he could ROM hack, I don't know how he'd put this on a cartridge. But then, so we go from there, and he just goes on to describe that the boards have changed completely now, and now there's like 5 or 6 different level types. The first of which being the quiz levels.
And then we encounter the secret mastermind behind this entire game.
The secret mastermind, the dreaded face, who apparently always gets a variant of the password theme whenever he shows up.
Yeah, and I have to say the soundtrack that did a rendition of it, and it actually is a lot creepier than the original password song music. So
yeah, well, again, that's the benefit of like 30 years of improvements in synthetic instruments.
That's true.
But when you're reading it, it doesn't really help you.
Unless you're listening to the soundtrack at the same time, which...
I was not going to give this that much effort.
Fair enough.
It is also worth noting, I guess, that this was originally, before this was posted on a blog, and then on another blog, and then on creepypasta.wiki, and then a bunch of people picked it up and started reading it. Yeah. This was actually originally posted in a forum thread in which the author would post the musical inspirations for what he was describing. Yeah. So there actually is a second... there is a second unofficial soundtrack of licensed music that the author was referencing when they described certain songs. So, fun fact, yes. Maybe.
Thank you again, Matt, for going so much detail into like looking up the information behind this story. I feel richer for it.
we gotta get something interesting out of this. Yeah. So we go to the quiz levels in which there is a face which the author has creatively named Face, and then there's a question at the top, and then on one side of the screen is yes, and on the other side of the screen is no, and it asks bizarre questions, it asks inane questions, sometimes it asks questions related to the game, and I'm not sure what significance this has. Even the author the author introduces Face by saying he's not sure what significance it has, except for a couple of specific instances. Because Face's face will change depending on the answer, and none of these appear to do anything to the game, except again for a couple of specific instances. And also the faces, with a couple exceptions, seem to have no particular relevance to the question being asked or the answer being given.
Thanks, Cosbydaf.
But again, I think this goes back to the thing that Cosbydaf was saying, that like this game is really boring. I had to find something to break it up.
Make it like maybe a little bit shorter, skim through some stuff, and then just make what you have a little bit better. I don't know.
Yeah, we can discuss.
We'll get into that after.
We'll get into the problems. The problems on top of the problems.
We're already 30 minutes in.
We're already 30 minutes in, and we're almost halfway through this. Yeah. So, Green Temples, this is clearly the designer of this was drugged out of his mind. I grabbed a screen cap, and I found monsters with skull faces that showed up.
Yeah.
And I think there was a description of music in this level that I didn't write down. And then there's, oh my gosh, and then the level ended with a boss, and that showed up totally unexpected. They never do that in the main game. I think it was one of the fake bosses from earlier, yeah. And then not Varan was a weird creature, or not Varan. It was a weird creature that looked like a horse with a backwards head that had a chest that opened up and shot missiles at you, but it was actually really easy. And then defeating the Not Hedorah. Not Hedorah was so the Green Temple was full of these weird like bat monsters with horse skulls for heads.
Yeah.
And like, and then he fought what was supposed to be Hedorah, but was actually a big snake with bat wings and a horse skull for a head that could summon all of the weird horse skull bat things.
Like cool macabre designs, but just
cool, interesting designs, and and this is like this thing was a giant pain in the dick because it could summon 10 of these things at will, and it would capitalize on you having to fight them to just kick your ass. But I beat it, no sweat.
Yeah.
And then after he killed it, he goes back to the Green Temples and finds out that all of the horse bat monsters are gone. Continuity. What does it mean? I actually have no idea. It's just like this game. I guess it's just setting up that this game has a continuum or something. And then he tries to skip a monster to just get to the end as early as he can, but then the game says nope, and then it makes him fight Orga, who is exactly like in Godzilla 2000, in as much as like at some point it unhinges its jaw and tries to eat Godzilla, but that exposes its weak point, which makes you kill it super easy.
Yep.
And
then Red shows up again.
And then Red shows up. Oh right, this is the run where obstacles show up. So he goes through with Godzilla again. And then he gets through the end, and he hears a bellowing roar again, and the drums, the terrible beating tribal drums. And then
he gets super excited and like laughing, and then he says, "Not this time, asshole!" And as soon as he says that, Red turns and faces the front of the screen.
You talking to me? Are you talking? There's no one else here. You must be talking to me.
And it made his.
You what, mate? You what? All right.
Yeah, like it's a cool idea. It's just, yeah.
So the game.
I feel like Red
like,
should have flipped him off.
No, but it's
So oh my god, the game's sentient. It understands, so it can hear me talking to it. That's creepy, I guess. And then after that, they go to dementia, and suddenly the boards. This is the point where I think the author acknowledged that
the game is.
This is also where he acknowledges that a lot of things are really boring, because this is where all of the level boards start getting really small. There start being fewer monsters, and there are also fewer types of levels. Let's see, what is it? Oh yeah, and then he finally acknowledges that this game is weird, and there's a line that I copied down here that says, none of these quiz levels and all this stuff, it didn't seem to add up in any sort of meaningful way, and I'm just going to spoil it and say that's a pretty solid description of this entire story.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And let's see, and my curiosity continued to drive me forwards, and there were two new monsters, because there's always two new monsters from this point out. Then I
Oh, does he get? Oh no, and this is also like that quiz.
This is also he goes to talk to Face, and Face asks a whole bunch of nonsensical questions and ends with, "Do you want a new monster?" And he says, "Sure." And suddenly, Anguirus shows up on the board as a new playable character piece. And I wanted to play Anguirus so much as a kid because he was my second favorite monster. Let me talk about how he plays in the game with detailed mechanics.
Yeah.
And then he can turn into a ball, and so Anguirus is like a weird armadillo thing that can shoot heat beams out of its mouth. And so he talks about how Anguirus can crawl around and can stand up and punch things, and it can shoot fire out of its mouth, and it can roll around to move super fast. And then he goes, and this is fortunate that he picks Anguirus, because he goes to the next stage, which has a whole lot of water and a transparency effect. And was that even possible on the Nintendo? And like,
yep.
dude, this game is fucking talking to you. There's a demon in it. This is clearly a haunted fucking game. Like, let's just accept this. And then there's a very long description of the level music, and then it talks about how there's monsters that come from all different kinds of heights, and man, this water slows me down, but it's a good thing that Anguirus can roll forever and move super fast, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to complete this stage.
Yeah. Good. I mean, imagine if he said no.
Yeah, he would have been fucked.
Yeah.
Like the one of these levels is specifically designed to show off Anguirus.
Yeah. Also, yeah, I just love that he's going into all this details. Like, and yeah, the transparency of the water made it hard to see, and not impossible, impossible for the NES. Yes, it is, but you've just encountered supernatural things in this game. So
the game responded to
what you said.
If it was a Famicom,
maybe.
If it was a Famicom, it would have been possible because the Famicom controller actually had a microphone in it. But
yeah.
This isn't a Famicom.
This is the American NES. This
is our dumb American NES that's gray and doesn't take floppy disks. And then there's the next level, which is just called An Unforgiving Cold, which looks not like a Nintendo game at all, and the music is a 12-second loop of a choir, and it makes you feel anxiety as you keep going on, and it sounds insane. I understand if you don't believe me. And I guess another behind the scenes, this level is such a detailed description of what it is, because it's literally based on one of Cosbydaf's nightmares.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Out of
yeah,
background-wise, I can appreciate that.
Literally, that's why it exists, and he actually says this is exactly what the music sounds like, because it's the beginning of some metal song slowed down to about 1/3 speed.
Huh. That's in the soundtrack as well?
That's not in the soundtrack. That's in the original forum thread. The soundtrack has its own special version. I don't think the soundtrack maker actually read the forum and saw the original music inspirations, because excepting the ones where he says this sounded like a song from Donkey Kong Country, or this sounded like a song from earlier in the game, they all seem to have a sort of a unified theme that is not what the original stuff was.
Gotcha.
And so so he goes through that stage, which is mostly empty except for some thing he had to fight near the end of the level, and then he has to fight Baragon. But Baragon isn't Baragon; he's some weird thing with an elephant skull and a minigun for a dick.
Oh shit! Yeah, the hell.
And a minigun dick that it'll freeze you and then it'll shoot you with the minigun. But fortunately, if you punch it in its dick, it takes a lot more damage and dies easily.
Also,
true of most things?
Also, I would like to point out that, like, again with the art, the ice breath is so just spray paint with MS Paint.
Yes, there are, for the most part, the sprite work in this game's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
There's a couple of parts where he just kind of shat a thing out with the spray tool.
I mean, you could have just made, like, the breath be, like, I don't know, make it kind of, like, there are ways to make a decent effect of, like, some kind of, like, breath weapon, and just change it blue or light blue or something like that, but
yeah.
he copped out, technically, with that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, when you read the original thing, it's like a month between these things, so there was a lot of time put into sprite work, and into writing, and into setting these things out, all of which I think he did most of it in MS Paint and some of it in Irfan, but yeah. So, let's see, then there's the Arctic levels, which he describes as sounding a lot like the Northern Hemisphere music from Donkey Kong Country, which was spooky for specific reasons to the author. Which is like, I always was afraid of dying alone in the tundra, and that's what the song reminded me of. And then this game stops being a straight action game and starts including platforming elements and bottomless pits that kill you instantly if you fall in them, he presumes, because he never falls in them.
Because he's an ace gamer from the NES period.
Yep. And this game is Nintendo hard.
Yep.
And then there's a bunch of Godzilla monsters that are mixed in with all of the other weird monsters, and the level ends with a really unheard of walrus kaiju from the Toho films, whose name I can't remember right now. But he liked that it showed up, and because it's a really underground monster. I wouldn't be surprised if you heard of it.
Yeah, very hipster. Yeah.
It showed up wearing thick-rimmed glasses and drinking a $5 coffee. And then there's the fight. Then he goes to the fight with Manda, who's like a big Chinese dragon thing. And this was a pretty standard fight, except Manda can constrict you, like he does in the movies. And then, just like in the movies, Ultragon shows up and is immediately killed. Which is a thing that probably would be really hilarious if I had watched any Godzilla movies, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched a few of them, but there were some of these that I didn't actually. I would have had to look at them again to get them. I saw Godzilla 2000.
Yeah, I've seen Godzilla. I've seen Godzilla versus Gigan, and that's like, aside from. Also, the original one, the original black and white one. Those are the only two movies I've seen.
I think I had Godzilla vs. Megalon.
You got me beat, because I've seen the North
Roland
American ones.
So the Roland Emmerich one, and then the new adaptation,
the good one.
Yeah. the good American one.
the one without Matthew Broderick.
Yes.
Where Godzilla is apparently made of boats.
Wait, what? Godzilla's made of boats?
There's a thing in the Matthew Broderick one. This is an aside because we're just talking about Godzilla for a moment. But in the Matthew Broderick one of the things is that he goes to New York, and so, like always, because Manhattan's an island, he comes out through the water, and of course he goes past a harbor, and so some boats get stuck on him, but like way too many boats get stuck on him. And so
true, yeah.
as he walks through the city, boats are just raining off of him for some reason.
I even remember that, because I remember him, like, the best part of that entire movie, to me anyway, was the old fisherman trying to outrun Godzilla as it just destroys the pier behind him. Where were those boats? Like, were they underwater already, like stuck on his back or something?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or, because
Godzilla's like Dio, except instead of throwing steamrollers from nowhere, he just summons boats. He has a boat dimension.
Oh God,
that's what's special.
Keep them in my bucket.
One thing interesting about, I believe it was Godzilla 1999. is where the Japanese Godzilla fights and kills the American,
That was-
the shitty Matthew Broderick Godzilla.
Yeah, that was Godzilla Final Wars, where all the
Okay.
Godzilla monsters, like every single one, was mashed up. And yeah, in the Sydney, there's a part where he dukes it out with the Japanese one in like Sydney, and just gets taken out like a bitch and just blasted away.
Yeah.
And the evil, the mad alien overlord dude, just even like comments and adds a quip about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, back to
his
this
game.
story. So he's supposed to fight Gigan, which we just talked about, and Gigan's weird in that he has an intro, and that a fish shows up, and then he like claws through it and jumps in, and then it's like this is a really hard fight because also this is the part where the author briefly stops talking about mechanics that had been previously implemented, like the game timer and some other things, and he just what is it? Yeah, it just becomes a straight out fight because there's no point in talking about the mechanics. After a certain point, we kind of know them. And then he fights with Space Godzilla, who can summon crystals and drain power from them. And I'm guessing that's just like the movies. And then decided I needed to see. I was freaked out, but after I saw those masks show up again, but I needed to see what the end of this game was like. And so he fights Red, and he decides to be Anguirus, because this is a water level, and Anguirus was good in those. So he shows up, and he does Anguirus' little rollout maneuver to outrun Red handily, and gets into the water, and oh man, maybe the monster can't swim. Oh shit! No, the monster can swim! Oh shit! There's like mines that are popping up everywhere, and the monster can like, the hell beast
tongue thing.
Yeah, he can shoot at his intestines as a giant spear and grab things. And I also, even in spite of the mines and in spite of the new attack and in spite of the fact that this monster both moves faster than me and also can kill me in one hit, I made it out of level unscathed because I'm a fucking pro.
Yeah.
MLG, son. Represent.
And take another shot.
And then from there we go from dementia to entropy. And we go let's see. So another long description of a soundtrack for the board that uses less and less Nintendo-like instruments. So let's see. And then from this point, I kind of stopped ignoring most of the stuff from the quiz levels because it seems it's largely inconsequential, except for like one question that matters, and I love a screen cap that goes with it. So like, not that I was reading them particularly hard to begin with, because the author even says like most of the questions are meaningless. And then he goes back to the game. So let's see. So this whole quiz section ends with do you like Mothra? And he says no, and it says too bad, and that takes all of his other pieces off of the board, and he doesn't want to play as Mothra because in the game Mothra sucks real bad.
Well, in the movie he sucks pretty bad too.
Yeah, I guess.
She.
Mothra's a girl. Yeah, I don't. The monsters are all kind of genderless.
Yeah.
Unless
it's bad when you're the main like protagonist in terms of the monsters in your movie, and your kids, after you get like just swiped away easily by Godzilla, are able to defeat Godzilla more handily than you.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So. But it turns out this is a blessing in disguise, because you absolutely need to play as Mothra in this level, on this board, because from this point on, let's see, there's the forest levels, which have a whole shit ton of enemies, which fortunately, because he's playing as Mothra, he's just able to fly over, which is also good because most of the enemies seem to just not be enemies. They're just living here, and it's like you're going, there's a forest, and the forest has really shitty looking trees, and there's a really detailed description of a soundtrack with flutes and bells, and these are and all the monsters look like they're from a Super Nintendo game, actually. And he flies over it. It's like I was looking at a wilderness or something. It's like I'm staring into another world. And this is also the beginning where the TV levels show up, which are
just weird.
Basically, yeah, they're just weird. They're just weird little gifs, basically.
Is that a beaver licking?
It's a beaver with an ice cream cone.
Okay,
and
that's an ice cream cone.
That's totally a lollipop.
It's either it's an ice cream cone or a lollipop or a popsicle. I'm not. It's one of those things. Admittedly, I just described like pretty much all the foods you eat by licking them. If you know one other food that can be eaten by licking, please write in. So
Subscribe.
And so the author eventually goes on to say, the author who I guess I can say he eventually describes his name is Zachary. And so Zachary goes on to say that, like, I have no idea what these levels are. I'm pretty sure they're totally meaningless, and the game's just kind of, it's like the results of a bad dream or something. It's just whatever power this game has being put into some level. And then there's a level where it's filled with clocks, and if you touch an hourglass, it makes everything go slower, and you fight dinosaurs. And if you touch another one, everything goes at regular speed, and you fight enemies from the regular game. And if you touch one of the glasses, everything goes fast. And you fight enemies from the future.
Yeah. Including the Troodon Man.
Yeah, including the Troodon Man. I'm just going to point out, this is a ROM hack from a haunted cartridge with no manual. How the fuck do you know what time period things are from?
Yeah.
I'm guessing Troodon he's kind of extrapolating.
That's been around since, like, the early 90s. Maybe earlier, I don't know.
The alien's legs bend backwards, man.
What?
Nothing.
Yeah.
And then he goes... Yeah. I guess maybe he's extrapolating, because one thing was like the past, and the other one's kind of like the present. And also, it's a story. So then we go to one level that's like the forest, except, oh man, the forest has been bulldozed, and now there's industrial equipment everywhere, and it's a toxic waste dump.
How is it
and
like the forest?
But it's got all the weird deer creatures, but they're being poisoned by toxic waste and, oh my god, pollution, symbolism. Can you taste it? Can you taste the symbolism in the air? And the music made me feel like I was choking and like I was smelling toxic waste. And there's a whole bunch of enemies that have bird skulls and cow skeletons.
I think it was at this point that we realized that the gamer or the writer of this was also on some kind of drug while playing this game.
Yeah.
I can taste the music.
He's just sick from pollution, you bastard.
Yeah.
Captain Planet!
Oh, God.
And then there's a mini boss in this, which I believe is the Moon Beast monster. And the author goes, no, wait, that's later. So there's some other mini beast in this, which is some animal with a whale skull. And animal with a whale skull. I don't know. And then there's the Winter Forest. Which looks like the regular forest, except instead of everything being green, it's white. And oh my god, and the beginning's kind of calm, except oh my god, all the deer things have frozen to death and they're covered in snow. And then it feeds into another level like unforgiving cold, and everything has lost body parts and they froze to death. And oh man, there's the winter raptors, but without a food supply, they're fighting and killing each other. And look at this blood! I took a screenshot.
It's so crazy.
And then it ends with the Moon Beast, and this is impossible. This monster came from my memories. As the moon cracks open and something falls in, and then there was some huge monster that takes up 3/4 of the screen and can hit anywhere in the world, and it's crazy as all hell. But I got it on my first try. And then he goes on to talk about his girlfriend from high school, whose name was Melissa, and she had episodes where she stands straight up and speaks without emotion. And then gets really concerned about it afterwards. And there was one night where he was out with her, and suddenly she ran into the middle of the street and got run over by a truck. And just as that level ended, suddenly the screen says Melissa, and then it says kill yourself. And then suddenly the word kill just becomes embedded in the screen and morphs into a crazy face. And I'm not going to lie, that part actually was kind of creepy.
Yeah.
That actually was creepy the first time I read it. Like, it's well done. I like that. It's a high point.
It's one of the few.
And then this is where the author's like, "Oh my god." This is where the author finally admits, "Oh my god, the game's alive. It can read my mind."
Yeah.
You like men. Oh my god, you can see into my thoughts? No. Fuck. So I got to see what else is here and take screen caps of it.
God damn it.
And obviously, I'm still safe because this is a video game, right? So we go to another TV level, which is a weird fish man, and I don't know what this means. What does it mean? It probably means nothing. And then we go finally to the levels that require Mothra, which are big gold temple levels that are full of they are like weird mazes that go in all directions. All two directions a game can go in. It's a good thing I had Mothra, because otherwise I'd be fucked. And it's, oh shit, suddenly so going through these, there's, let's see, Mothra had shrunk to half her original size because I wanted to draw more complex screens. And then there's really elaborate music in the background, and there's statues that look like Melissa's face, and then there's a regular monster, and suddenly this flying machine picks it up and drops it into a machine that turns it gold because symbolism. And then he knows, and then at this point, the author takes a second to note that the monsters have stopped moving, so it's always his turn now, and also he can move wherever he wants to make the pacing go better.
Yeah.
And then he goes to Indigo Cliffs, and the background looks kind of shitty, and the sprites are mixed up wrong, and there's these weird bobblehead creatures that like to jump off the edge of a cliff because symbolism. And then there's the condors from Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster that are picking up some of them, and he says, I don't know what's driving these creatures to want to die so much. Maybe it's the moon. And talking about the author being afraid of the moon, this apparently has some special meaning to it. And so then he fights Batra, who has multiple different forms and is super faithful to the movies. And it's this weird tonal change after it's like, oh my god, this world's alive, and it's haunted by demons, and then we go back to how it's a game about Godzilla.
It's like he totally forgets that like he just experienced this like mind-crushing horror apparently, and then just went back and said, oh yeah, it's just a game. Oh man, this is really in depth.
Yeah, this fight's actually kind of fun, especially since Mothra doesn't suck anymore. Look, they did all these things that make Mothra actually kind of good in the game. Like, Mothra can fly over things, which apparently she couldn't.
Oh my god.
And then Megalon, and Megalon has Gigan's theme, because that's important because he was partnered with Gigan in one movie.
Yep.
And there's another TV screen which looks like Super Nintendo's, like an executioner except the holes in the mask are in the wrong places, and he's smashing in an old lady's face with a sledgehammer. And it's playing the password theme because it's fuck the police. And then there's the black labyrinth, which he starts by saying, I felt really tired, and there's a lot of hints about points where the game's able to influence his body or something. And then and suddenly he hears a set of furious roars, and the lights go dark, and suddenly he starts taking damage from a foe he can't see. But fortunately, due to color correction, he was able to show them off, and they look a lot like one of the SCP entries, actually.
Yeah, I think, I've seen that one, I think. But...
Yeah, it's the one that's invincible and can recover from any move and move super fast. But yeah, and I would have died, but fortunately there's these statues that look like Melissa's face that provide light and ward off the creatures, and so it at this point the game becomes another game entirely with all new objectives and controls and monsters and everything.
Man, this is like a really like elaborate game for an NES system.
Yeah, well, admittedly, it is haunted by a demon.
That's true.
So. And then he fights Mechagodzilla, who looks like Godzilla, but suddenly his flesh burns away. And then he gets more interesting. But halfway through, he uses the glitch of the game to turn into a thing that has a human face and like an assault rifle for a tongue, and shoots crazy laser beams. Unfortunately, Mothra can fly over it, and it doesn't move that fast, and he kills it. And then he has to fight Red, and so he goes into a Red temple, and it turns out when Red shows up, suddenly he has weird bat wings, and he can use his crazy intestine tongue to blow through the walls, and it was crazy hard, and Red can move really fast, and it was a maze, and I literally didn't know where the exit was, but I got out on my first try.
Pro. Yeah.
Fucking pro. So then we move from entropy to exodus, which I found out from Cosbydaf is apparently another spelling of exodus. So if anybody at home's trying to figure out what the level themes are, that's what this one is. And so he starts off with a quiz level where there's a bunch of nonsense and asks first, would you like a new monster? And then asks, will you miss me? And he says yes, and Face is sad, and he doesn't know why that's happening. Maybe Face acknowledges that he lives in a game and everything he knows will end when the game's turned off. I don't know. But this brings in our new monster, Solomon, who's a weird humanoid bat-like creature that's covered in blue fur and has a skull for a face. And we go to this white temple, which has a new mechanic, Find the Gem, which is, again, this game is no longer the Godzilla game.
It's now a Zelda game. Or a Metroid game.
Yeah, no, actually it is. It's like the Legend of Link or whatever.
Yeah,
the second, whatever Zelda 2 was. Yeah. And so then there's some kind of choir sound in the background, and these monsters are sure hard, but fortunately Solomon's crazy OP and is able to kick ass and get the gem. And this is where we find out that every time Solomon wins a level, it shows a picture of him and just says still the best 1973.
Why? No reason.
Yeah, Cosbydaf actually said it means nothing. I just did it to make the character more interesting.
Oh my god. I'm drawing connections now to the movie Rubber. Why was this done? No reason.
Fuck if I know, but let's go.
Fucked if I know. This is a sentient tire that sets people on fire and makes them explode. 'Cause, fuck it.
Yeah. Why not?
So then we go to, there's the bronze pyramids, which have Egyptian music, and there's some twin monsters which are crazy and hard, but fortunately there's a mechanic where you can make one of them kill the other one. And then the game mechanics change now, so nothing ever moves, none of the boss monsters ever move, and I can go anywhere, and this makes the story go really fast because I made this level kind of big. And then there's a level with totem poles where there's no enemies, and there's Native American music going on in the background. There's a TV level. I'm not gonna say anything about it. I think it's a guy with a faucet for a head. And then he just says, I have no idea what the fuck these levels are. They don't mean anything. So then there's a city level, and this is a level that seems like it should show up in a Godzilla game. Fun fact, at no point in the original NES Godzilla game do you ever fight tanks in a city. That kind of level never shows up in the game.
While following in true movie to game form, the game has nothing to do with the movie itself.
And then there's a laboratory level that has a gritty industrial beat, and there's stasis tanks full of Giger-esque monsters that jump out and hurt you a lot, even though Solomon is there. And then the only way to get out is to jump in an elevator and get shot at a bunch. And that probably means something. And then there's the Heart Temple, which is introduced pretty much because it's full of harmless enemies that you can use to recharge all your health, which is going to come up, which is going to be very important. So he fights Gorosaurus, who uses Gazora's theme and does his signature kangaroo kick. And then Solomon's mad OP and fucking wrecks his shit. And then he fights Kumunga, who's a spider that has a signature web attack, who also gets his shit wrecked because Solomon's mad OP. And then he sees some other TV screen. And then he fights Ghidorah, who starts out as a Dorat, which is apparently a child of Ghidorah of Ghidorah in the movies. He kills the Dorat, and then it turns into a samurai head, and then there's a boss rush, and he has to fight all of the fake monsters from before. And then when he kills the Dorat, suddenly it turns into a samurai head, and all of the fake monsters fuse together and turn into a mega boss. And this boss is really hard, but fortunately we have that Heart Temple that I can just go out and recharge my health whenever. And so suddenly the time limit mechanic comes back, because otherwise this fight would be impossible. And every time he kills something, some parts of it come off, because this is kind of an interesting monster, but yeah. So then Red's level is here, and there's instead of the face or the base, it's a crucifix, and when he goes there, Solomon can't enter here. This symbolism? And so he goes into a graveyard, and he mentions it's an 8-bit rendition of Prayer for Peace from the original Godzilla, and takes special mention of how it's especially sad, even though it's 8 bits. And then we're still mentioning choirs in. So we're at this point. He does take a time to mention that this is still 8-bit music, but we have complicated thing. We have flutes, we have violins, we have actual different drums, and we have choirs.
Yeah.
And then there's this weird blue entity that shows up hovering just above the graves, and this weird blue enemy shows up hovering just above the graves, and he doesn't feel very happy when he sees it, but he does feel a sense of calm, and he realizes it must be an angel looking over all the dead. And suddenly Red shows up and blows up the graves, and it's angry music shows up, fire happens, he kills the angel, he eats it, grr, angry, and as Zachary escapes, he says, "You're going to pay," and then Red looks and his eyes glow. And we go to Zenith, the final board.
We're almost done.
We're almost done. We've been going for like an hour.
I know.
So Zenith is a radically different board. For one thing, it's basically a straight line, and it only has like one kind of every level, and it's all red. And so this is the final escalation of everything getting really fucked up, and all the levels are really fucked up. And so we go to we get really, really detailed new icons, and you see that Ghidorah and Destroya, the god tier enemies from the Godzilla canon, show up. And so he goes to the quiz level, and he sees, oh, that's why Face asked if you would miss me, because he's dead, and there's blood coming from his mouth, and it just says, "Get out," and the "Get out" starts glitching everywhere, and blood comes out of Face's mouth, and so he leaves, and then he goes to, and then he sees, oh, we have a new monster. Except when he tries to select it, it gets moved off the board. Oh, symbolism, maybe. And he goes to a TV screen, and but the icon for the level shows the screen is broken. And then he shows it's just a dead body in a burned out city. No music, no animation, dead. The game was telling me to give up. And then he goes to a red temple, and Godzilla is shrunk down again because he wanted to make a really complex level design, and all the beasts from the labyrinth showed up, and there was no way to get around them because he wasn't Mothra, so it's just down to pure reflex and skill, baby. And he kicks their asses, and he finds this weird shrine to the Hell Beast and some other monster, and he has to do a platforming section where things come from all over, and falling down a pit would mean certain death. And then he sees the Blue Angel again, but now it's red and it has a skull for a face. And enemies come from all sides while he has to also fight the Red Angel, and platforms drop out as he does damage to the Angel, and it looks like he's gonna die. There's only 3 platforms left, but boom, and he kills it, and it disintegrates. And this is a hard fight, but boy oh boy was I lucky to win it.
Yep.
And then the next stage is just so this is the stage I actually liked a lot, because the design was super fucked up and actually kind of looked like it could work in the game, where literally every platform in the game is just the word "kill" mashed together. And he described the soundtrack as like somebody took all the worst sounds you could do on an NES and threw them in a blender. And if you want to know what that soundtrack is, I actually decided to look it up.
Oh, no.
Look up the PC game Crazy Bus, and that's literally what the soundtrack is supposed to be. But the original soundtrack actually came up with a much more disturbing version that actually is sort of an action-y theme too, while also being fucking terrible.
The video check out on the soundtrack link that we will put in the description below.
Yeah, that video actually starts off by saying, "Warning: this music is incredibly unpleasant to listen to." And so, let's see. So Mothra is also half the size, and I'm going to suspect this has always happened because I wanted to make much more complex stages, but also the author says, I didn't feel as confident with my giant monsters, no longer so giant. And the music, so there we go. And there's, and then all the enemies are like mashups of all the other enemies, and he has to go fight this boss that's all of the sprites from the game, like, mashed together and move around, and this is still way complex, and like, man, if these are the easy levels, I wonder how hard it's going to get. And then he goes to Blood Lake, which is, I'm not sure why he's going through all these stages, because he actually just needs to go to the end and fight the monsters, but I guess whatever.
He wants to add some more fluff to the game.
Yeah, he wanted to have a whole bunch of themed levels to make this longer and stronger and keep the friction going on. And so, also a thing, you'll notice the interface changes in that the game no longer mentions the score or the power levels. It stops glitching them out and it just stops displaying them entirely. And so Anguirus is shrunk down, and he picked that because Anguirus is good for water levels, and then he has to fight a whole bunch of monsters underwater, and then he goes back to the top, and it looks like there's a bunch of bodies on the water, but it turns out the bodies are alive, and the only way you can get out of them is by using Anguirus' roll attack, which is fortunate because if he didn't play as Anguirus, he would be fucked. And then there's that ends with just saying, it just cuts to a black screen that says "Mother," and then there's a humanoid figure hung as hanged from a noose, but by a spinal cord, and then the stomach distends, and some weird bat creature with a clown face jumps out and starts shooting needles or something.
That's
and there's
up symbolism right there.
Yeah, there's a scream roar and a fight that's entirely unlike the rest of the game, especially since at this point we've changed all the mechanics so there's no longer a timer, bosses show up in levels, you can jump over things, you can switch directions. We have at this point created an entirely new game, but again, what the fuck ever, it's haunted by a demon. And then there's the organic level, where everything was photorealistic, and apparently the way that he did this was to take photos of, like, meat, and then he put them in Irfan view, and there's an option in that says convert to 8-bit, and so that's how he made all of the sprites for this. And so all of the enemies were composites of skeletons and animals and gore and things that have skull faces. And enemies were smart, and if you had to jump down to a platform, they'd stand there and wait for you, and it sounds like it's actually really frustrating as a video game, and as I played it, I felt ill, and I almost paused, I almost paused the game to go look for a bag. It immediately takes us out of the immersion, because it's like, he still points out how safe he is, that it's like, oh man, this game was almost so bad that I almost stopped playing it. But it's fortunate that sometimes the monsters would start fighting each other, and then he has to fight a thing that has like a T-Rex head, and then the rest of it is some kind of weird poop abomination, and it detaches from the ground, and it can clip through the floor, and it has a whole lot of really cheesy stuff it can do, but he still wins because he manages to strike a weak point that makes it spaz out so that he can murder the shit out of it.
Okay, so I would also like to point out, at this point, like, again, this, like, the NES doesn't work this way for graphics.
Yeah, no. Well, admittedly, he does start off the level by saying, "Oh my god, this is like photorealistic. This is impossible for the NES to do."
Yeah, this is completely. Oh my god.
And then the final level is Hell, which is a level that's honestly is like reaching the peak of like Super Nintendo graphics at this point. Yeah. It is somehow more advanced looking than the level where he used actual photos, which I don't get that at all. But yeah, so there's the background, although the background kind of looks like hot garbage, but the rest of it actually looks pretty good, and again, too advanced, and there's a whole lot of weird demon things and some centaurs with flaming whips and things he had to kick into the water, and this level made me feel really hot. It made me feel so hot I had to pause the game and go get water sometimes.
Almost as if we're foreshadowing to something that's coming up.
Oh my god.
Or the whole time we've been foreshadowing about things.
We've been building up to something, and then there's a level boss, and there's a huge roar, and another thing shows up with a skull for a face, and actually this monster, this monster actually was kind of cool and did sort of look like it should be on the on the regular Nintendo maybe. Yeah. I think its color palette was a little too complicated, but it was a neat monster and kind of a nice departure from everything else. And then he has to fight Ghidorah, but it turns out that Ghidorah,
back to NES standards.
Yeah, now we're really back to NES standards, because he has to fight Ghidorah, but Ghidorah has a weird different sprite, and it turns out it's King Ghidorah, which is the god tier version, and he's super faithful to Ghidorah, and then the game is still super faithful to the monsters from the movies, even after we fought through a bunch of stages where we're literally supposed to be looking into hell.
I think this game suddenly went from being a Godzilla NES game to Doom side-scroller.
Yeah.
At some point.
And then it goes back to still adhering to the mechanics of the game.
Yeah.
And so I attacked King Ghidorah, and he used the glitch to become Mecha King Ghidorah. And then he was able to do some crazy as shit move, but fortunately the timer went out. So I switched to Solomon and just wrecked his ass. And then the base changed to a red icon, and I could feel the hate flowing through it. But it comes to the one last Godzilla monster, Destroya, who actually, reading a brief synopsis of Godzilla vs. Destroya, this fight actually is basically a rundown of that movie. And Destroya is considered by Godzilla fans to be his ultimate nemesis because of how he can adapt to everything Godzilla can do.
Yeah.
So he's the Doomsday to Godzilla's Superman. references. So he fights the ultimate enemy from Godzilla, and now there's nothing left to do but to go to the level with Red. But it turns out it's a black screen and nothing's there. But suddenly he hears a familiar drum beat, and from the background Red emerges, and we finally get his name, which is we've been saying forever. It's just Red.
Yeah, spoilers.
This fucking demon's name is Red. And we find out that this is finally the point where we've broken down his defenses and he can be wounded. And then he starts fighting it, but oh my god, when Godzilla gets hurt, suddenly he feels the pain that the monsters are feeling.
You feel pain in the game, you feel pain in real life.
And he's like, okay, fuck this. This game is actually physically causing me pain. I'm just gonna turn it off and get up. But oh my god, he's paralyzed to his chair. All he can do is play. He looks over to his computer and sees that it's automatically taking screenshots.
Well, that's it. Oddly convenient. Thanks, Red.
Thanks,
You're
demonic
a
game.
Demon. It's like, I want people to witness this.
And then he begs with the game.
Let you live. Or I'm gonna write this pasta myself.
Spoiler, he never won. So he starts begging with the game because he doesn't want to play a game that actually physically hurts him. But Red says, no, only one will survive. And like an idiot, he decided to fuck with the demon, and discovers that if he dies in the game, he dies in real life. And
Just
also
like
a demon takes his soul.
Sorry, what was that? What was that thing you said before?
Die in the game, die in real life.
Yeah. I meant after that.
The demon will take his soul.
Ah, yes.
So, and he's able to fight Red and wound him, but it turns out he moves very fast, and he has a shit ton of moves, and there's no time to think or form a strategy. I just had to play. I was fighting a literal demon from hell through the medium of a video game, and I had no predictable movesets, but I did pretty good. I did pretty good considering that this game was actually physically hurting me, and it shot fire at me, and I could feel the flames burning so bad that I screamed and I paused the game, but then Red unpaused it, and what the fuck, now the game can play itself.
You're cheating, that's not fair.
You're cheating, that's not fair. And so the timer switched out, so he changed to Anguirus, because at this point Red had changed into his fish form for some reason, and so he's fighting him with Anguirus, and he's doing some damage, but then Red moves off the screen and starts dropping mines like an asshole, and doesn't make it possible to hurt him, and then he starts flying in from everywhere, and he says, like, what the shit, if you're gonna cheat, then why even let me use the controller? And the game says I can't break the rules, even though a couple seconds...
them multiple times.
Even though the game has now broken the rules a couple of times, but it still has some of the rules still going because the timer thing still happens, so he can swap the monsters out. And then he manages with Anguirus, and even Anguirus gets knocked down to like one life bar, but then he's able to he gets Red to his flying form and decides to fight him with Mothra, which was a bad idea because Mothra sucks, and Red just immediately eats her. And then he mentions how he feels getting eaten.
He feels being crushed by Jaws.
Yes. It briefly turns into vor fiction.
Oh no.
And then he shows up and he brings Solomon in, and there's a brief exchange where we find out that Solomon is a demon that formerly worked for Red, and he says, "I'll never join you. I'll die before I join you again." And so he fights Red with Solomon, and Solomon kicks his ass and he's dead. But oh wait, that's not even Red's final form. And now Red is 40 feet tall and made of gold and has literally like 40 life bars. And Solomon gets stomped into oblivion, and then Anguirus gets murdered to shit, and then Red says, "I'll tell you a secret. I killed Melissa."
Dun,
I'm like,
dun, dun.
I'm like, what the fuck?
The hell?
I'll just point out how this final part in the game goes out of its way to raise the stakes like 2 or 3
Even
times.
higher than it should have.
It's not enough that the author is fighting for his very soul, but it turns out that Red killed Melissa, and now he is torturing her forever. So now he's getting wounded by the game, which will kill him and steal his soul if he loses, and also is trying to save his friend's soul from the devil.
Wow.
And then he
All in,
fights...
bitches.
Yeah. And then he fights Red with Godzilla, and Godzilla also goes down like a bitch, because even Solomon was kick-ass, and he couldn't do it, and suddenly Red pulls some bullshit and paralyzes gives him a heart attack, and almost kills him. But then Melissa shows up and says, yes, even beyond, I am, the angel shows up and says, I am Melissa, and even beyond death, Red tortures me, but I can give you one last little bit of help, and I will be your girlfriend forever. And then she moves the monster back to the board, and then he's able to go to battle with Red as Acacius, the Golden Light, who is apparently, I think Acacius is apparently there's a lot of saints that have shown up that have that name, so symbolism. And so Acacius is kind of a cool monster, and the author takes a lot of time to describe the things, even though he doesn't do the screenshots. Acacius has arms that turn into swords and can shoot laser beams, and he just obliterates Omega Red, but not the one from X-Men. And it's like I was fighting the second incarnation of this evil demon from hell, which not only makes me feel pain, but literally almost killed me. But with this character, I was able to beat him. And then he gets a message from the angel Melissa saying, "I am finally free now that you've killed my tormentor." And he says, "Oh, but what about Godzilla? And what about Godzilla and Anguirus and Mothra and Solomon?" And I feel remorse for their loss, but fortunately Melissa has crazy powers and brings all of them back to life, including Face.
Yay!
Happy endings for everybody. Love conquers all. And so he goes to sleep after that, and then he calls up his friend Billy, and Billy says, "Hey, you pulling a joke on me?" And says, "Nope, I didn't make this crazy demon-infested game." And says, "Where'd you get it from?" And he says, I got it from a friend I trade games with all the time. He seemed trustworthy." And then he called him, and he immediately hung up. And then it comes to the ending, and it's like, I considered playing it again, but like the game hurt me and tried to steal my soul, so maybe not. But I can't destroy it, because maybe Melissa lives inside the cartridge, I don't know. So I did the selfish thing, and I sold it on eBay because I didn't know what to do with it. And I told the person I sold it to, "Dude, seriously, don't play this game. It's got a fucking demon inside of it."
And fini.
Fini. That only took 90 minutes.
Oh my god. So I would just like to point out at this point, Zachary's a dick at the end of this. Cause
I mean, he even admits
some person.
He even admits he's a dick.
Yeah.
Like he says, "This was crazy selfish of me, but I didn't know what to do." So
you couldn't have just like locked this up in a chest or a safe or something, bury it if you didn't want to destroy it. No, you couldn't have gone the ET route. The ET Atari route. You had to go onto eBay and sell this to some other poor schmuck. God damn it.
Well, how else are you going to set up the sequel?
Oh, gotcha.
Fuck it.
Because I know
so
Douglas Life is looking forward to that discussion.
Yes. So, that is NES Godzilla.
Do you need a glass of water? Do you need a moment?
I have some water here.
Okay. Thank you for doing the rundown on that one.
Yes. So I think we discussed a lot of the problems we have with this game. Yeah. One thing I will say now that we're through it is that in some after stuff, where some people, it's been noted a couple of times that this really doesn't read like a creepypasta, and Cosbydaf himself has said, "Yeah, it's not really a creepypasta. I intended that when it started out, and it was originally going to end around chapter 5 with the kill yourself thing. But then a lot of people liked it, so I just figured I'd keep going and give it a proper ending."
Just like the Supernatural TV series.
Just like Heroes.
Yep.
Just like everything.
They should have stopped, but no, they decided they were victims of their own popularity.
Just like everything good that became bad.
Everything ever.
So let's see. So there's a couple other
dead listeners from after you've participated in the drinking game at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. This. I just like my biggest beef right now with this is that, well, one of many I'm sure, is just that like he goes into these periods of like freaking out about how haunted and creepy this game is, and then ignores that entire feeling the next paragraph down, and starts talking about how awesome the gameplay is, and this is amazing. But he does
Yeah.
that for each over the course of the entire story. Like it's like he has like brief amnesia.
And I think that's more a thing of how this was constructed, because every chapter came out like, when you take a month in between writing things, it is hard to maintain tonal consistency, and this was a very ambitious project. I think before this, Cosbydaf did a story called Normal Porn for NormalPeople.com.
I've heard of that group.
Which is a short form story. Like, I think this is the longest creepypasta I've ever read.
Is it longer than Ted the Caver?
Oh fuck no! Okay, it's not longer than Ted the Caver. And it's not longer than Ted the Caver. I will say that Ted the Caver is a better story. It's definitely not longer than Happy Appy or 1988.
I dread doing
the latter two of those are shit and keep getting worse. This one actually does manage to keep the energy up, like. Partly because of the found footage sort of way it's constructed, and partly because it does a lot of good J.J. Abramsing and setting up a mystery. The problem is it brings a lot of setup and doesn't actually pay off on any of it.
Yeah, because like half the stuff the guy writes he doesn't even have a plan behind it.
Yeah, there's a lot of most of it is red herrings. Like, it's just stuff thrown in to make so we can keep going through the game and not have to just keep describing, I went from left to right in this level and I killed things.
Yeah, because that's how the game is actually, and it's not very entertaining.
Yeah.
And my personal opinion is that this story would have been so much better if that's all it had been, because it would have been just way shorter. It's just
if they just
so
kept
unbelievably padded.
Yeah.
And I just wanted it to be over. Maybe that's my problem, is that I wanted it over, so I was like, why are you still writing this stupid, convoluted shit?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other things, like I think one of the things that's really kind of bad about, like, that this whole thing is, the author mentions, I had this girlfriend named Melissa and she died, and then the game's like, I killed Melissa. And the main thing is, there's no setup for that. There's setup for so many other things, and
then this comes out of left field.
Yeah, and the thing was, somebody actually had a question for Cosbydaf, saying like, how did Melissa have this copy of the game when she was younger? And Cosbydaf's honest response was like, I really didn't think of that, and that's a major oversight.
Yeah, no, like, and what I'm thinking it over now, like, maybe the birdcage thing was supposed to be...
The birdcage thing is a very obvious, Cosbydaf even says the birdcage thing represents Melissa being trapped inside the game, but it's a minor clue, and like, the author doesn't even go as far as to say like, Melissa and I met because we both liked Godzilla.
Yeah, like, that would have made this a little bit better, at least in terms of like linking that hook into it.
Yeah,
but that's not what we got.
Yeah, we got there was setup for so many things, and none of them were what the ending was. Like, and that's kind of the frustrating thing about this, is that it leads up to something that, I don't know, it leads up to something irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the ending is just so like Gary, or like Mary Sue-ish, kind of like, he like, love prevails over evil.
Love conquers all. Deus Ex Machina, 11th hour hero.
Yeah, he was on the cusp of destruction and death, and then his dead girlfriend comes back as an angel and protects him and gives him the power up he needs, and beats everything.
And also, okay, you're playing a game. You lose a character, and I no longer have access to that character. Why does he care about these 8-bit giant monsters?
I mean, he does state that he's a huge fan of Godzilla, but I mean, at the same time,
they're not dead.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, they're.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Like, do I mourn every Mario I've ever lost?
I mean,
I got 1,000 more.
That's technically the premise of Super Meat Boy.
Yeah.
Just to run through an intense, or like a complicated level, and then at the end to watch all your versions die horribly all at one shot. But yeah,
Now,
yeah.
There is a way the game could have made the Melissa ending work, because it is hinted that the game can like read his mind and do stuff like that, but it's never set up and it's reading his memories, and it talks about this is the face Melissa made, and I think if it did a more subtle drop, that there are. Because there's a way you could
like
interpret
the game was, like,
this,
trolling him or taunting him, trying to like lower his spirits, or
yeah,
maybe,
there's a way you could interpret this, a way that is wrong because we have word from God on certain things in it.
Unfortunately,
but but there's a way you could interpret this that is like this game is haunted by two different things. One of them and they're locked in eternal battle, and one of them wants to torment the person playing the game, and the other one just wants to kill the other thing, or I don't know. So one of those forces could represent something terrifying to him, and the other one could represent a big force from his life. But we have word from God that there's a demon haunting this game and it's tormenting his girlfriend. But I think
in this 8-bit world,
but I think if it was less overt about I killed Melissa, and then Melissa shows up and says I'll help you out, I'll help you fight this monster, it could have been a better ending. As it was, It was like. It was too blunt, and it didn't feel like any of the setup. It didn't feel like any of the clues dropped were leading to this.
And I mean, if you're gonna read something this long, wouldn't it be nice to the ending have incorporated some of what you had read, as opposed to just this obviously out of nowhere
trying to
Melissa thing?
I think by the end of this, it looks like he was trying to, like, make it a big bang, like to end it, because it was coming to a close.
And so that's why he like raises the stakes a bunch of times, but unfortunately in doing that, he pretty much just like he left all 9 of his Chekhov's guns on the altar, or on the mantle in Act 3, and instead drew Chekhov's dagger from his coat. which we had no indication was going to be there. Because he sets up so many bizarre elements that could have come back. Like, I think Leviathan, you were saying like Face is the true mastermind here.
In joking, but yeah, that would have been really, like, I think that might have been interesting if he had come up. He had not been just killed off. And in fact, had been more of an end plot point.
Well, and I mean, Face seemed to help him out. I mean, when he needed to be using Mothra, Face took away all of the other monsters and made him use Mothra, and
Face also gave him Anguirus. Face gave him Godzilla. Face gave him fucking Acacia.
Yeah. Face gave him Solomon. Like.
It seems like, I don't know, like, Face should have been, like, maybe, like, the Melissa thing should have maybe just been pulled out of the story completely, and just had Face as, like, in place of Melissa, although not as bad, like not entirely, and it might have been better. Like, also, this, like, the ending really shouldn't have had, like, okay, so the game if you die in the game, you die in real life, that kind of plot hook thing where, like, you need to keep playing, otherwise you die. But then also gave him this reason to be angry and want to continue going.
Yeah,
the fact that Melissa's being tortured by the demon. Like, he threw both, like, plot hooks, both these plot devices at us, and he only needed one.
And also in the chapter before that, he said, like, as he sees Red, like, eating the angel, he says, "Oh, I'm angry. You're gonna pay for that." And, like, we've already got a motivating factor for why he wants to kill Red, and then it adds 2 more of them, just in case you hadn't read the previous 7 chapters of the story.
Which, at this point, I mean, first off, I would never read this story from a chapter like a newest chapter without reading the first ones.
Yeah,
like I would just, and if you're either like a new person reading it, so you go straight to the beginning to read it. That's how you should read it, or you're somebody who's coming back from previously reading whatever was posted last, so you know everything that's gone on so far.
And that said, this comes to, I think, a thing that came up in a lot of your older episodes, where it's like, what the fuck do I know? Because there's a lot of good commentary, and a lot of people like the ending for some reason.
Yeah, I mean,
although when
there was
enough blowback that Cosbydaf made a fake ending where it turns out John Madden is the true enemy all along.
I didn't show you that, Leviathan. It's. Do you have the link?
It's in the game.
I'm gonna actually try and find that right now.
Yeah, I don't have the link up
right now.
Also, if you're wondering who Zolta is somebody from the original forums where this was originally posted.
So the alternate ending. Since everyone hates the ending of this to the story, I took a little time and made an alternate one. I personally find it a big improvement.
I totally had that finger puppet as a kid.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah.
I think we all did.
A good portion of us did, yeah. And it was then that Red revealed his true form. He was John Madden all along. I sharded myself out of sheer terror, and the sound must have caught the attention of a monster who came to my aid, and thus the final battle did commence. The resulting battle was so intense that it caused the NES to explode, sending the cartridge hurtling out of the window and into the wall where it smashed into pieces. I broke the game, so I guess I won?
Yeah.
I love, like, it's a fun little, like, poking fun at your own creation.
Yeah. It's the fission mailed ending.
Yeah.
The UFO endings again against Godzilla. Yeah. So there's also some stuff we can say about the creator that I had done a lot of reading, and there's some people that gave him some criticism, and some of the criticism he took and some of it he didn't. But one of the ones that he did point out was okay, I totally get you on the note of Zach being able to beat the game with little actual difficulty. I mostly did this to make the story better, and because I thought having the monsters die at Red's hand would be a lot more interesting than having them die and then get brought back in levels. But given a new opportunity, I think Godzilla replay will be much more of a struggle. So it's worth noting that he takes some criticism on this, and I don't know. I read a little bit of Godzilla Replay. It's kind of dumb because, like this one, it's ambitious, but it's even more ambitious, and it also has more super faithful renditions of the Godzilla monsters, except it's from the perspective of somebody who doesn't like Godzilla. So there's descriptions of, like, I don't know, I'm just this Rodan guy. He's some kind of weird pterodactyl thing. But yeah.
So the game. So he completely reverses his character concept in the next one.
Yeah, and I don't know why this person keeps playing through the game. Also, Godzilla Replay continues the theme of ignoring most of the mechanics of the original Godzilla.
Fantastic.
To the point where like you now have a level selection board, and you now fight custom. Basically, every board end boss is now like red, except they're themed after one of the deadly sins. And when you kill them, it drops a medal into a portal door. And there's some laboratory data hidden in it, and apparently the game's an experiment, and maybe the first Godzilla thing was an illusion or a hallucination.
So what I'm getting out of this is that he took the Godzilla game, like the idea, like used that, and then mixed it in with Christian themes like good, evil, like the hell and heaven and angels and demons, and then in the next one he's going to put in like. It was a prototype of some kind.
I don't know. I've read through as much of it that exists. Cosbydaf says he's still working on it as of June 2014, but it hasn't updated since fucking 2013.
Oh God.
So because his computer died and he had to redo a lot of stuff, and I think at some point just said fuck it. I don't know. I've read through some of it. I didn't like it as much as the first one because it's becoming sort of rote, and the mysteries being set up in this one aren't quite as interesting, especially since Once Bitten, Twice Shy. It is also worth mentioning, I think there is an actual explanation as to where the TV level and quiz level things came from, and that's because when Cosbydaf was originally creating this pasta, He had 3 different games he was planning on going with. Two of which are mentioned in the first chapter of the game. He was going to make an Action 52 based creepypasta, which, if you don't know, Action 52 is based on Chinese bootleg Nintendo games, which are like the 10-in-1 cartridges, which have like a whole bunch of really shitty games on them. Action 52 is a game that costs $100 when it was new. But hey, it was worth it because it came with 52 games, and all of them were fucking bizarre.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that, yeah.
And Cosbydaf said, I was going to make an Action 52 creepypasta, except I realized that game's already surreal enough that I can't really make it too much weirder. So instead I incorporated elements from Action 52 and put them into a game that was more conventional and which I could explain to people.
Well, try to explain to people.
which is where we get all the surreal things like face and the TV screen levels.
Nice. Yeah, I kind of want to see what was I know this is Leviathan's first reading of it this week, and we've both read it before. I remember when I first read this, I actually enjoyed it for the most part.
However,
going back to it for the sake of the podcast and the discussion, I found myself just poking the hell out of every little bit of it. Like, I just ended up really not liking
it's because we weren't immersed in it anymore. When you first read it, like, I fucking devoured this the first time I read it, because it sets up so many hooks. It's super what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen next? What's the mystery? What's the
smoke monster?
Yeah, what the fuck does it all mean? And then we find out, the island is actually limbo and we're all dead, and nothing means anything. And so when you go through the second time and you have the knowledge that nothing means anything, then you have less immersion, and you start noticing a lot of weird shit.
Poking all the little holes.
Yeah, and that's where I'm like, wow, this is every chapter is basically the same. So I made that drinking game.
Yeah. I love that drinking game. Like, when you told me about that, I was just like, oh my god. It's just so ridiculous.
Yeah, so
I guess you had the same kind of first time with this game or the story as I did then.
Yeah, it was. Really, a lot of people did, and I think it's the first 7 chapters that allow a lot of people to convince themselves that the final chapter is good, because there's so much built up to it, and it's everything except the ending is really strong, and then the ending just kind of like shit bombs.
It just tries too hard.
It got too ambitious. It flew too close to the sun, and its weird little 8-bit wings melted away.
So, Leviathan, what was your... After reading this and cursing my name, what was your reaction to this?
See, I guess I haven't pissed you off, because, I mean, we're still friends. We still do this all the time. So clearly I pissed off someone, and... It's clearly, I've jumped to the conclusion that it's obviously karma, and clearly I've got to turn around and live my life as a better human being, because this is just bad. I don't want it to be worse.
There are other ones too, so yeah.
Oh, sorry, big yawn.
At least it's better than fucking Mario 64.
Oh god, don't no.
It had to be. But honestly, with this, it's too long, and it spends
way too much
chapters spinning its tires and just doing nothing except adding this padding that, I enjoyed this stuff about the Godzilla monsters, because, I mean, I'm fairly Godzilla ignorant, but I love me my kaiju, so I enjoyed that, but, the levels that had no monsters, I mean, seriously, I don't care about deer on some sort of alien planet.
Yeah.
Like,
but the symbolism, Leviathan, the symbolism. Don't you grasp the symbolism?
I grasp symbolism, but
the symbolism.
I don't care about symbolism. You cannot use symbolism and tell me what to feel, because I will immediately...
But don't you feel angry that we're polluting the earth? Because we showed that serene forest, and then there was the industrial level?
But
don't you feel angry at the excess because that one creature was turned into gold?
No. I'm the kind of guy who enjoys playing a video game on the TV and setting up, a movie playing on the laptop so that I can have as much shit to do as possible. And if we weren't polluting our planet, I wouldn't have these things. So, yeah, your environmental message, eat a dick. Like, I'm not saying we should actively try and pollute the planet or anything, but it's gonna happen. Deal with it.
I also don't understand why there's a message like that in this game. Like, is Cosbydaf just like a huge like?
Let me see what I think. I think the symbolism was tied to the specific world it was in. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was the entropy level. Yeah, it was the entropy level, and it's because entropy is things break down over time, and it's our greed and excess that will be our downfall, or I don't know. I'm fucking reaching at straws because all these things have names, and all these things have weird symbolic names, and all the levels in entropy are really specifically symbolic of something. I don't know.
Yeah, and then it just boils down to a demon versus an angel.
Angels versus demons, and die in the game, die in real life.
Just like Stay Alive.
Frankie Muniz. You will never outlive your child acting career.
Nope.
Well, we've been talking about this for like 2 hours, so we should probably wrap it up.
We should, yeah. Okay, so general consensus. No recommendation or recommendation of the train wreck?
I mean, I think we hit most of the. I'd read like half of it, maybe listen to a reading of it, or if you're not going to do anything else, like skim the text, look at the screenshots, because most of the screenshots are actually pretty well done. So if you like pixel art, there's a lot of it here. The screenshots are really it's like Ben Drowned. Ben Drowned was a story I hated, surrounded by a bunch of videos I liked.
I could probably actually get behind a reading of it. I'm actually really regretting the fact that I read this. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say that a reading of it would make it better, but at least it would feel less tedious.
Yeah, a lot of the people who do the readings do add in the music and sound effects and stuff, and even actually include the screenshots as the video on YouTube.
And
so,
I probably would have hated this a lot less if I had have just gone straight to a reading and enjoyed that, or not enjoyed it, as the case may be. But reading it was just so depressing and so tedious and monotonous of just doing the same thing over and over again. Like, I get it, it's a level that wasn't in the game and you beat it. Congratulations.
Yeah, this is what happens when you go from being a short form writer to a long form writer and try and just do it the same way.
Yeah.
Because this is like 8 short form stories in a row.
Yeah, but they're all the same short form story.
Yeah, basically.
With slightly different wording.
Yeah.
Again, there's a reason I was able to make a drinking game out of this.
Yeah, exactly. All the repetition just helps for that. I would actually be interested to read not next little while, but down the road, read his that other one, the Normal Porn for Normal People, because that is a creepypasta, right?
That's actually a pretty good one.
I've read it before. I think,
also worth noting that normalpornfornormalpeople.com, somebody did buy that domain. It wasn't him.
Nice.
And Cosbydaf has actually said he's really mad that somebody bought that because they went and they turned it into a shitty RP board.
Wow.
But yeah, so Cosbydaf has shown, and I think one thing that's worth noting is, for the most part, this is a very technically capable pasta. It definitely has a lot more work and craft put into it than most of what is on this show. It's like, and even most of the harshest critics said there's a lot of creativity in here. There's a lot of work put into this, but it's too ambitious. You didn't really think a lot of the things out when you were making them. You need to come up with a better structure before you just sit down and start writing out a huge story.
Where you're ending before you start, or at least have a vague idea of where you're going.
Yeah,
and I mean, he clearly just didn't the whole time.
I think he did. He did. Given the stuff about Red and the stuff about Melissa, it's clear that he had a thing that this is going to have significant. This was going to have this demon, and the demon was going to have significant. Or there was going to have this demon, and it was going to have Melissa, and we don't really know much more than that. But yeah, then about halfway through the story, he's like, people like this. I'm going to keep making it.
Yeah, and that's
how we got the 2 Matrix sequels, and we all know how well those turned out.
Yeah.
You mentioned, I think, off the podcast that he was also getting feedback while he was writing the story from people?
Yes. There, because as I mentioned before, this started as a forum thread, and so people would say, people would point out a lot of things. In fact, that's actually, I think, why this is actually very technically capable, or very technically competent. If you read some of Cosbydaf's early stuff, you'll notice that for the most part, he actually does get like capitalization and sentence structure and stuff like that. But he has a problem that he admits to, where the words "where" and "were" are interchangeable in his head, and so you'll see him just write "where" when he's supposed to write "were," or just write "where" like a lot in his old stories instead of other things. So this actually, like a lot of good pastas, actually had the benefit of going through about 2 or 3 drafts before we got to it.
Yeah.
And also there's a thing where some people were in between posts on the original forum thread. He said, "Oh, I noticed that I didn't describe music in this one part, and so I went back and edited it so that I described the music."
So necessary. Also, I definitely have an addition to your drinking game, because this will just up the lethality.
Awesome.
Every time there is just a straight-up word missing, you know what the word is because of the sentence. And it's... I mean, the word changes from time to time, but, like, there's just a word not in the sentence that needs to be there. Because, I didn't actually keep a tally or anything, but up over 20 for all of this.
Huh.
All right, we'll throw that in. I've read the story. I've read the story 3 times, and I've missed it. I've missed those every time, but I'm guessing my head just filled them in.
Like I said, the word that's missing is obvious. Like it'll just be, I can't think, like other or something like. There's clearly a word missing from the sentence, but you're gonna
piece the rest of it together from context.
Yeah, and I can definitely see how any reader could just auto-add those words and not notice.
Yeah.
But it infuriates me every time I see it, because I catch it in a lot of the pastas we read, but like, for one this long, and now that I found out that there's so many, that there's been a few drafts, I'm just like, why is that still there?
Why is that being missed or overlooked?
Yeah. I mean, I'll just point out that that we actually that my our show we actually have a book that we're selling, and somebody after there's actually a typo that was in the description for our product for literally 2 years. and somebody just pointed it out. So I can see how that would happen.
It can. I get that, but
yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Kind of yes and no to recommending.
Yeah, it's. I'll give the cop out answer and say it's good until it's not.
Yeah, like Goji. I actually listened to Goji 73's reading, and I listened to Mr. CreepyPasta's, and I actually found that I liked Goji 73's better. I think he edits his reading of it a little bit.
No, because Mr. CreepyPasta, there's a lot of points in there where he stumbles over his words and then immediately just resays something and doesn't cut out the line that he flubbed.
Yeah.
I'm actually seriously considering going back and giving this a listen and finding out for myself if it's actually improved by that.
And you know what the hell ever. I recommend that you read this because you've listened to us talk about it for 2 hours, and that's about how long it takes for to listen to somebody else tell the story.
Actual readings of it too. Yeah. Holy shit.
Yeah, if you waste enough time listening to us blather.
Yeah.
If you want to waste another 2 hours.
Yeah. God. So, yeah, I guess that's really, all that has to be said about Godzilla.
That's NES Godzilla Creepypasta, the Creepypasta on NES Godzilla.
Involving NES Godzilla.
I think somebody just as one last note, somebody on the forum said, don't you think you should call when you put up the actual blog saying, I'm going to post everything on this blog from now on, somebody said, don't you think you should call this story something other than NES Godzilla Creepypasta? And he said, I mean, we're already this deep.
Yeah.
So right. NES Godzilla Creepypasta. It's not really a creepypasta, and it's not exactly about NES Godzilla.
It starts there, and then just spirals away.
Far, far away, off into the distance, twirling majestically into the sky like a saber-toothed tiger.
Very poetic.
Yes. With that, if you've listened to this and have any comments or questions, you can put them in the comment section below wherever this gets posted, either on YouTube, the Kiwi 6, or Tumblr. You can check it out on iTunes and send us a review. That'd be awesome. We're, I think, all actually on Twitter at Review Cultist, Dr. Leviathan, and
Catman2455.
Yep.
You can follow my podcast Twitter, which is just The Drunken Ugly.
Yes. Actually, yeah. If you want to throw in a promo right now, go.
Yeah. If you guys want to listen to some talk about RPGs, mostly RPG actual plays, check out The Drunken the Ugly. We play role playing games. We have over 400 episodes on the site now. We also have them nicely archived on our wiki. If you want to jump in anywhere, I recommend starting with the one shots and getting into our flagship campaign, Mrs. Frida's Halfway Home. If you like listening, if you don't like RPGs, think about it like a radio drama where occasionally we stop and roll dice. We also have a Let's Play channel where we play all kinds of bizarre games. One that went up recently is Hammerhead High, which is a dating sim that has sharks.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You're going to listen to that, aren't you?
Maybe.
And you guys are also on Patreon now, too, right?
We also have a Patreon. If you like us, I don't know, give us some money. All the money, none of the money actually goes directly to us. We use it exclusively to pay for things for the show, things like new microphones, things so that we can go to cons and meet new people and do interviews and make new stuff for you guys. You guys did listen to our show. Maybe, I don't know, we could make things. Dente Rigamortis is part of our unofficial podcast network. So help us. Help yourself, help us, help them.
We appreciate it. Yeah. And other emails or any other things you'd like to get a hold of us with, you can also reach us at aldenterigamortis@gmail.com. That's aldenterigamortis@gmail.com, where you can send us other suggestions for other creepypastas. Yeah, pretty well. Anything we'll eventually get through, because we have a small queue going on right now. So, I guess until next time, I have been your host, Review Cultist.
I've been Dr. Leviathan.
I'm still Matt.
And this has been Al Dente Rigamortis. Sleep well.
Good night.